Greetings, everyone. It's Trey. I'm here on this 22nd day of March 2023. I'm here with my new friend Brandon, whom I just met within a day or so, I think, on Twitter. And I think I'm always trolling atheists to try to get conversations, and I'm kind of snarky with the way I do it. And Brandon came back with a quip and a very friendly retort to one of my hashtags. I like the hashtag barking seals, and asked me. I said, "Would you be willing to test your ideas or something like that?" And he said, "Yes, if you will promise or devote yourself not to hashtag atheism for 1 week." And I said, "Sure." So I've got a little post-it note here on my computer monitor, so I'm not allowed to hashtag any atheist hashtags for the next week for Brandon, so that we can have this conversation. So thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you joining me.
Sure.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about yourself that might be interesting? I'm always interested to know the background of the people that I talk with. I know I looked up, you live close to me, just less than 2 hours, I think, or something. You're down in Joplin, is that where you live?
Yeah, Joplin, Missouri.
And are you native Kansan then?
Yes, actually. Well, not native. I was born in Nebraska, but spent less than a year there, and then spent from ages 1 to 17 in Kansas.
Okay.
And then, I was in the Navy for a stint. I moved around several places throughout the country, and ended up kind of back in the close to the area where I grew up, so near my folks and some other family. So
cool.
Nice.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, very nice. So would you mind telling me a little bit about your religious affiliation and maybe a little of your history? And I'll tell you about me too as well.
Sure. Well, I consider myself atheist, and originally, I guess I was raised Christian, though not with a lot of church, and I mostly went to church with my grandparents when my parents would take me when we were visiting, but I didn't spend a whole lot of time with it. I lived in a very small town, about 2,000 people, all the way through school, and during that time, basically, it was assumed that everybody in town was a Christian, and there wasn't a lot of diversity there, and I just basically accepted it during that time. I did a lot of activities, and there were a lot of church-based activities that came up. Like after we would play a football game, we would go to the fifth quarter, and the fifth quarter was a religious little after party. There would be a couple of prayers, and we would have snacks and play games. Nothing. I would say that was not like a strong indoctrination, to be certain, but it was something that was of note to me. And then, after I joined the Navy, I spent I met a lot of different types of people, and they shared their perspectives with me about their beliefs and disbeliefs about things, and those often made sense to me. And at some point along the way, I started considering myself agnostic. And then, so after a good while of that, I met a friend who called himself an atheist, and really at the time that word had some pretty negative connotations to me, because my idea was, well, how could you know? And that's that idea pretty much had stuck with me about 10 years, and then so I did have an atheist friend, and I talked to him about his atheism, and it's when it comes to how could you know that there isn't something, that's a possible thing introduced the concept of Russell's teapot, which is, well, how do you know that there isn't a teapot orbiting between Mars and Jupiter? And you can't know it, but it's extremely unlikely. So what I understood from religious stories of God, as I do highly to that effect. So and that was about 10 years ago, I started referring to myself as atheist. I've had a bit of a journey since then, particularly in deconstruction, where I have evaluated basically the source of all of my ideas from pretty much anything I had assumed throughout my life. I looked at this critically and skeptically, and I came to the conclusion that, to me, I'm comfortable saying for certain there's not obvious that's not distracting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you very much. That was a great information. I'm a native of the Kansas City area. I grew up in Overland Park. I don't know if that is, but it's a suburb of Kansas City.
Sure.
Been here my whole life. Except for four years, I went down to a missions organization called Youth with a Mission when I was 20 years old. And I had kind of a religious, well, I did have pretty much a religious upbringing. My mom was a believer. My dad was just not. He wasn't hostile or anything. He just didn't go to church. So I went down to this missions thing. It was a youth missions organization down in Northwest Arkansas, and it was there that I understood the gospel and gave my life to Christ when I was 20. So I'm 56 right now. I'll be 57 in June. And there I met my wife, and then we came back up here. So I've only been gone about 4 years. I've got 6 children, and sadly I'm divorced. My wife left me about 10 years ago. I'm of the Baptistic persuasion, Reformed Baptist, if you will. I'm a Calvinistic Baptist. I'm a dental lab technician. I make crown and bridge work for dentists. I'm self-employed. The way you interacted with me, it almost seemed like you kind of knew who I was. Have you had any exposure to me or anything like that?
Actually, we'd had a few interactions about previously on Twitter. There was I don't know the person at all, but it was I was slightly I guess annoyed by the way that as you said, trolling atheists, but because I think it's pretty understandable that a lot of atheists online who are there in particular are a bit high-strung about and take things rather personally that shouldn't necessarily be taken that way, and I felt like maybe you were poking a bit, but yeah, we'd had a couple of interactions before. Nothing substantial, and yeah, I changed my photo a couple of times, so I might not have been as recognized, but
okay. Well, I interact with a ton of people. I'm fairly new to Twitter. You can see I only have a few followers, and I've never pursued trying to get people to follow me or anything like that. I was native to Facebook, and I've got a lot of interaction there, and I prefer Facebook, but they are so, what do you call it, they're so censorious that I was eventually going to get kicked off. They just don't allow you to talk about stuff. I mean, well, they threw me in jail. When I left, they threw me in jail, the Facebook jail, for saying that, just commenting to somebody. And I think it was like 9 months after I made the comment to another woman who's an atheist, and I said, I have found that atheists are abysmally ignorant when it comes to the philosophical foundations of why they believe what they believe. I mean, embarrassingly bad. And Facebook said that was hate speech and threw me in jail. So I left. And the only reason I came back to Twitter is because Elon bought it. That's why I'm a blue check mark, basically, not because I think that's something cool. It's just I want to support his desire to establish a more free and open venue for the exchange of ideas. I'm a big fan of the First Amendment, and big fan of engaging with people who have ideas different than mine. That's the only way that I can really learn, is to have my ideas challenged.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
And
So, go ahead.
hopefully you're a fan of the rest of the First Amendment, including the Establishment Clause as well, as I am. I feel that that's extremely important.
Yes.
That
Excellent.
that there are no favoritism toward any particular religion, at least policy, and
Yeah.
that's it's certainly my reason for being there, and for discussing atheism in America, is that I'm very concerned that there are a lot of pushes to have some rather specifically Christian ideas implemented in the policy. And as
Mhm.
long as we're on the same side of the separation clause of the First Amendment, then I got no problem really.
Mhm.
I basically say, well, you believe what you want to believe, or what makes sense to you. The conclusions that you reached are perfectly fine, and as long as they're not interfering with my ability to do the same.
Mhm. Good. Okay. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the First Amendment. In fact, I found that almost
Trey, I'm gonna
nobody
have to
really.
hold
Sure.
just a moment there. Your audio was completely gone for me for a moment there.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
No, it's very bad right now.
Uh, let's see.
Some sort of feedback, it sounds like.
Okay, hold on. Let me switch the. Maybe I need to put the echo. Let's see. Echo can. Is that any better?
Yeah, a much.
Okay, it must have been the echo cancellation needed to be on or something. Okay, so I'm a huge fan of the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause, and I found that very, very few people understand what it is, where it came from, and what its chief function is. You got people on the Christian side that want to say there's no such thing. It has its, it's not actually in the First Amendment, and it's just in a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptists, and it's basically made up or something like that. And you've got people on the skeptical side, more skeptical side or secular side, and they say that yes, the Establishment Clause means that basically you shouldn't have Christians in politics, or you can't have your Christian views in any way influence the way that the law is made, and both of those are equally incorrect. Are you familiar at all with where the doctrine of separation of church and state came from?
I didn't study it extensively. I'm
Okay.
as
It,
far as I feel pretty comfortable with the spirit of it, and the exact phrasing, in fact. But as far as origins and original intent, there, I mean, we could that's to me a bit more of a legal opinion discussion, and not really something that I'm into.
okay. Well, I mean, you need to know the reason for something. It is that's how you can interpret it. That you know exactly what it means.
Well, I mean,
Um,
similarly, we could discuss the Second Amendment, and whether the intent regarding muskets is similar to an AR-15. But
Yeah,
I'm
you do.
really
Well,
not
you don't
going to
understand
go.
that either, but I don't want this to be a Second Amendment. All right, let's stick to the First Amendment here. All right, so well, let me just say this: for the Second Amendment, the whole purpose was to protect the citizenry from the government.
Agreed.
In other words, to keep the government from taking away our First Amendment. That's what the whole purpose is. So it's not about muskets; it's about nuclear weapons if you need them. If you want to follow strictly what the original intent was, but let's stick to the First Amendment, though. It was Thomas Jefferson got the concept from John Locke. John Locke got it from Roger Williams. Roger Williams was the man who established the First Baptist Church in America. He was highly persecuted because he was Baptistic. Most of the colonies were Paedo-Baptists, where they baptized babies. They were Congregationalists or Presbyterians or, Church of England or something like that, one of those. And he wrote a book called The Bloody Tenet of Persecution in 1644. There's a really good book by John Barry. He is not a Christian. He is a very famous historical author. He also wrote one on the flu. It's called 1917, I think, or something. I can't remember when I can't think what it's called, Spanish flu. But anyway, he wrote this book on Roger Williams. I feel like Roger Williams and Making of American something or other. I can't remember. Anyway, it's a great book. And Roger Williams was an amanuensis or a secretary to Sir Edward Coke, who was a jurist, one of the top jurists in England in his age. And I think both of his parents died, Roger Williams' dad. And so Coke kind of took him under his wing kind of as a son. And so he got to see all these really high level debates and discussions within the legal courts in England. And this was a time when if you had the wrong beliefs, you could have your ears cut off and your tongue split. And Edward Coke is the guy that came up with the castle doctrine, where every man's house is his castle, where you have the right to protect your property. That was his thing. And his great nemesis was Francis Bacon, who was a Kingsman. Anyway, they had a lot of battles back and forth. And Roger Williams came to this idea of understanding the New Testament Christianity is that the first table of the 10 Commandments, which are the first 4 commandments, you shall have no other gods before me, you shall not make for yourself an idol, you shall not take the Lord's name in vain, and you shall keep the Sabbath to make it holy. Those were our duty to God. And then the last 6 about murder and adultery and lying and stealing and stuff, those are our duty to man. And he was saying for the government to impose the first table of the 10 Commandments, in other words, relating to our worship, was like spiritual rape. In other words, it's none of their business. There's a distinction or separation between church and state. The church has its job, the state has its job, and the two shall never mix together. Like the state should never tell you how to do communion or how to baptize or anything like that. But it was there was a muddling of it in colonial America. And so he actually he escaped. They were going to send him back to England when he was here, and somebody filled him in on it. And because he was going to die, they were going to kill him if he went back to England. And so he escaped into the wilderness, and the Indians took care of him through the winter and saved his life. And shortly thereafter, he founded Rhode Island, which is probably one of the most secular states in our union. But his desire was not to rid society of religion; it was to keep religion pure. Because whenever you mix politics and religion, you generally get politics. And that's the problem with it. So we want to keep them very distinct. And so Baptists, generally speaking, are very thoughtful. Baptists that know what they're talking about are very thoughtful to the doctrine of the separation of church and state, because our history is very filled with a lot of persecution. And because there were some crazy Baptist stuff, the Anabaptists had some crazy stuff, and the Quakers, and they would prophesy naked and do all kinds of stupid stuff. I come from the Puritan movement. I'm a Reformed Baptist, but there was a lot of crazy stuff, and it was understandable some of the stuff that they were concerned about. But the doctrine itself, though, is focused on protecting religion. It's not about protecting the state, and it's something that is on the federal level, not so much on the state level, because you don't want to have a state religion, because people have different readings of the scriptures, right? You got some people say you baptize babies, some say you don't.
And that's rather specific to Christianity. And as it is, our country is established as as we were all taught, a melting pot where people
Right.
were actually welcome to come here regardless of their particular affiliations or lack thereof. And so there's certainly a spirit to the to our country that is that has embraced the freedom to think and speak as you choose.
Right.
And so yeah, that's very consistent with the First Amendment. And
Right.
so if in I guess where I tend to have problems is when in government supported and particularly with education, and there is when you're pausing for a Christian prayer, then that's exclusive to those who and sometimes alienating to those who don't join in. As I was mentioning the little after party with the football games, it's that wasn't a school sponsored event, and that was perfectly okay. But when the team huddles up and they start to say a prayer, and there may be one or two teammates who feel alienated in that, and so it ends up being a bit of a problem. So they're not they don't have the same level of freedom and yes, they have the freedom to alienate themselves, but at that point it's somewhat a government involved exclusion. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's that big of a deal where at any time somebody is offended at something, you can't the tail cannot wag the dog as long as they're not being coerced.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a problem with people. Now I do think if you've got people in a say in a public school system or something, you've got someone who is using their position of authority to purposefully proselytize. I think that is a problem. But the glory is, you said the First Amendment is so important. I think you understated it. I think it is everything to America. The difference between America and everybody else is that nobody is forced to believe in religion, but I need to have the liberty and the freedom to be able to say things that are controversial in order for anything to work. And this is why I'm so concerned about the First Amendment. Say, for example, for me to say that homosexuality is a sin is a point of being censored in our current society. And the thing is I'm not interested in banging somebody over the head with my views. I want to be able to talk openly about it and be able to reason with my perspective. The glory about America is that people become Christians because they see the reasonableness of it and they choose to want to do it, as opposed to, say, for example, in Mexico or in, Central America. Christopher Columbus came over and the conquistadors came in and basically said to the natives, there's the gospel of Jesus Christ. Let me tell you about it. And they said, do you want to believe? And the pagans said, no. So they pull out their sword and they said, this is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Do you want to believe? And they said, yes. And so the religion that you have down there is not because they want to do it. I've been down to Mexico. My wife is Hispanic. And so I've been on several missions trips in Central America and in Mexico and stuff. And the religion, especially as you get away from the cities, it's just paganism with Catholic garb over it. They just do their pagan worships, and they got, high places where they worship they sacrifice chickens and all that stuff. And it's because you had the externality of religion coerced upon people. And when you do that, you don't get true religion. It's got to be because somebody wants to do it. So this is why what Roger Marshall said, that when you force the first table of the 10 Commandments, you are committing spiritual rape. In other words, you're forcing it upon people. And we've got to be careful that we're not trying to impose a view upon people just because I say so. And I think that's a very dangerous prospect for Christians to do. Like, I'm not a fan of Christian nationalism. I'm not a part of that movement at all. But I do want to have the freedom to be able to give my perspective and reason with people about it, and to demonstrate the compelling nature of my perspective. And with that, I'd like it. Can I go ahead and give you have you seen my argument for the existence of God? Have you been exposed to it?
No.
Okay, if you don't mind, I'd like to go into it now and demonstrate it to you, because
All right.
you as an atheist have no burden when it comes to the acknowledgement of the existence of God. I do. He who asserts
I
must
appreciate
prove.
you saying that. A lot of people are of other opinions about that.
Right, and Christians oftentimes will try to dodge and weave and say somehow like you got a burden, but you don't. Very strictly speaking, and I won't expand on that, but I'll say this: that if we're going to begin our conversation with a couple of presuppositions, I need you to give me something. Are you familiar with presuppositionalism?
Oh, absolutely. I've written about it.
Okay, I hate presuppositionalism.
Fantastic. It's
I,
it's antithetical to science, which is
and to reason.
yeah.
And to Christianity, I would say. Now, I'm not saying that people that are presuppositional are not Christians. I have some very dear mentors to me and men that I really respect. They call themselves presuppositionalism, but I just think it's a 20th century chrome and plastic innovation that will not stand the test of time. It's basically Enlightenment philosophy with Christian lipstick. It's Kantian idealism, really. That's what drove it for Cornelius Van Til. But anyway, let me say this. But I do need a couple of, and the reason I say that is because I said I need a couple of presuppositions. But I'm not promoting presuppositionalism. I'm just saying we need some epistemological tools that we must grant at the beginning if we're to have any knowledge. And I've never had anybody. Not once have I ever had anybody not grant me these, but I need these at the beginning so that we can have a proper exchange of ideas. Would you grant that the law of non-contradiction or that reasonable coherence must be something that we have if we're going to inquire about anything?
Uh,
The laws of thought, the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, the law of the excluded middle?
no, this is not something I have not done any effectively any research when it comes to philosophy. I think that you can basically develop it on your own. And when it comes to these phrases and rules, this is kind of exactly what I've been trying to deconstruct. But let's can you maybe rephrase that? And
Sure. Let me just say this: this is utterly uncontroversial. Anybody who does any science whatsoever says, whatever you do. Some people will say that the law of not that I'll try to be simple as I can. That logic breaks down at the quantum level. They'll say when you get down to quantum mechanics and stuff, which I disagree with. It can't. But I'm saying basically Aristotle's rules of thought. Basically, the law of non-contradiction says that something cannot be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. I cannot exist and talk to you right now at the same time and not talk to you at the same time in the same relationship. In other words, when I make an assertion, I'm saying its opposite is not true at the same time. It's utterly. I'm not doing any fast ones, or I'm not doing any kind of tricks. You've got to have rational. Are you saying we must be rational? Let me just say that. Do you think if we're going to have a conversation about anything, we've got to be reasonable?
I think it's certainly useful if your intent is to communicate. Yeah.
Right. Right. You can't even communicate without reason.
Right.
So that's all I'm asking for, is that we're just going to
sure.
be reasonable about this. And then secondly, the basic reliability of sense perception. And I'm not saying that our senses are perfect by any means. They are that's why science is always changing, because our senses trick us. But would you be willing to grant that we can at least have a basic reliability of sense perception? Because that's the only connection that we have to the world that we live in.
I fully agree with that.
Okay. All right. And that those are the two main things that I've got to have. Okay. So now that we have these, and these are not assertions, but my problem with presuppositionalism is it basically takes the argument itself and assumes it as the conclusion. Right. And it's the petitio principii fallacy. It begs the question. And the difference between, and presuppositionalists say, well, Trey, you're presupposing logic and sense perception. So therefore, you're a presuppositionalist as well. And it's like, no, my presuppositions don't have any content. They are not the proposition. They are the instruments for determining the proposition,
I mean,
whether it's valid or not.
One can't actually, you must assume that that we're actually having this conversation,
right?
And that otherwise there's no relevance to it. In order to be relevant, you have to assume that that what you're saying is actually what you're saying, and that we are somehow linked in our existence, and that but yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah, so this is just classical foundationalism. It's just, these are just some things that we must accept. But it is theoretically possible that there is no such thing as reason, there is no such thing as sense print. So we just accept these. So, and everybody who does science always, has always accepted these things. All right, so with those two things in mind, I have what's called a four possibilities argument, and I hope that you can remember these. I don't know if you have a piece of paper, but if something exists, there are only four possibilities. Either it's an illusion, or it's self-created, or it's self-existent, or it's created by something that is self-existent. Okay, and I'll go through each one of these and
okay,
suss them out.
Trey, I'm going to need about 2 minutes break.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, okay. Actually, I'll take one too.
Great.
So we'll be back.
Okay, we are back. So, yes, you're describing the four categories that you've determined things that exist should fall into.
Right. There are only four possibilities, and I've been doing this for over a decade, and I've not had anybody else that could. Some people will come up with a fifth category, and it's just one of the other four. So, if I may, I'll just go through each one of them and demonstrate, work through each one as a possibility and whether it's valid or viable. The first possibility I gave was that which exists is an illusion. And what I need for this, basically, all I need is enough sense perception for this argument for me to know that I exist, that I really do exist. You can be an illusion. This will work with solipsism or whatever, because it doesn't really matter if you exist. I mean, it could be a dream, what I'm having here right now, but I need to know that I, the inquirer, exist. And so I got to have logic, and I got to have enough sense perception to know that I exist. And I don't really care so much if the rest of the world even exists. So the first one is that which exists, we'll just say myself, is an illusion. And the problem with that is, are you familiar with Rene Descartes?
Yeah.
Cogito ergo sum.
Yeah.
I think, therefore I am. All right. In order for me to doubt my own existence, I would have to think, and thinking requires a thinker. And so therefore, if I'm doubting, I'm thinking, and I am thinking, that's I think, therefore I am. So at the bare minimum, if somebody says, well, everything's an illusion, I'm saying, I'll ask this question, I'll say, so who's asking? There's got to be a questioner if there's a question. So the very fact that I'm inquiring, I know that I exist. So everything cannot be an illusion. At least I know that I, the inquirer, at bare minimum exists. Okay, so that knocks off the first one. The second one is that which exists is self-created. And this is why I asked for the law of non-contradiction at the beginning for rational coherence. In order for something to create itself, it would need to exist before it is. And that's a violation of the law of non-contradiction. You can't make yourself before you are. If there ever were a time when there were absolutely nothing, we would have nothing today, because something cannot make itself before it is without violating the law of non-contradiction or the law of identity. So that which exists cannot be self-created. I could not have made myself because I didn't exist at one time. All right. And so then the third option is that which exists is
Yeah, we just got some more feedback interference again.
Sorry. Is it better now?
No.
Can you hear me? Testing. All right, let me look here.
Still having
Check
it.
1, 2. Check 1, 2.
No,
Can you hear me
not
now?
doing well. Do you have a freestanding microphone, or is it connected?
No, I don't. It's in my camera. I'm wondering if it's
like
the
maybe
internet.
When you put your drink down or something, maybe a cord got knocked. I'm not sure, but yeah, the audio is really bad right now.
Let's see.
I think it might have gone.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It might be something with the internet or something. Okay, so the third option is that which exists is self-existent. And that which is self-existent cannot be subject to change, because anytime something changes, it must be brought to that new state of it's an effect. And anytime something is an effect, it is brought to a new state of existence, whatever it is, by something outside of itself, which itself is already actualized, something that's already, like I'm potentially bald. I'm almost there. Okay, so I am moving from potential bald to actual baldness. The only way that can happen is by something, because if something is pure potential, then it's really nothing. Okay. I don't really have time. I don't want to go into Heraclitus and Parmenides, but there's some pre-Socratic philosophers. And Parmenides basically said change is an illusion, because he said the only thing that you can do, if something changes, the only two categories you have is being and non-being. In order to change, it would need to cease to exist and then come back into existence out of nothing. And Heraclitus said, no, everything is changing at all times. And Parmenides basically said, if everything is changing at all the times, it's all pure potential, then it's actually nothing. And so therefore, it can't be pure change. This has been great.
I'm not following that bit, because I actually do view the universe as basically an occurrence, an event, an ongoing thing. And if you are viewing it as basically we are moving through an explosion that's happening from our perspective very slowly, then I would say that I'm definitely one in the camp that views it as constantly changing.
Right, but do you believe that there is a continuity? Are you still you as you change?
But see, now I don't have. Uh,
Every 7 years, every cell in your body changes, right?
uh, okay, I'm going a little deeper than that. Basically, as we are, as every part of us and what constitutes us is in constant flux. There is no, as I see it, there is no coherent definition of of uh, of what constitutes a human or what constitutes something else. They're just constantly changing things because yeah, from the moment that you are I mean, as far as I can tell, there's no really coherent definition of what constitutes a human.
Okay, so you don't believe that you know what a human is. I mean,
Uh,
you need to be consistent about it.
yes, I am telling you, yes, I do not believe that anyone can coherently define what a human or an organism or an entity or any thing is. I just view us as actually all part of a singular occurrence, and that is what we refer to as the universe.
Okay,
So
so you're
it's
anti-science.
it's somewhat similar to, as I understand it, a Buddhist philosophy where we are all one, and I think it's generally I think that's basically correct, but we don't have distinguishable borders between every time someone tries to describe what a human is, uh, there's some inconsistency to it. There's no clear border between what is us and isn't us. When you trim your fingernail, is it no longer you? Is it used to be you? Is it is the air you're breathing? It's filling your lungs. Is that part of you? Is just your DNA you? And if you didn't have any water within your body, you would be a shriveled husk. Would that be you? So any sort of definition that someone tries to give to a human or any other animal or the separation between us, it ends up falling apart at some point. So that's and when I said deconstructed these things, this is how, because we take these words for granted, like I am a human, I have hands and I have feet and I have blood and we have the sense of what we are. But if you actually tear it apart and try to find the actual meaning in what you're saying there, then it starts to make, basically it's incoherent at that point. So I know it's probably I hope it's not something you've heard a lot, but I am working on developing all of this out and am in the process of writing a book. It's a little slow, but because it's hard to organize all these thoughts. But bottom line, I do feel that we are just part of an event, and that event is constantly changing. It doesn't have a state at that remains.
Okay. Um, may I be perfectly frank with you?
Sure.
You're not as genius as you might imagine yourself to be. Let me ask you something. Do you believe in science?
Do I believe in what?
The discipline of science.
I believe that it's a fantastic way to determine what is consistent from perspective to perspective. So,
But you
uh,
just said there is no consistency.
what is between
I don't think you've
perspectives?
thought about this much at all, my friend.
I, you know what? If you just want to tell me that you think that you know more, then that's great. But if you want to have a discussion, and then
We're having a discussion. I want you to tell me how, if nothing has any determination whatsoever, how you can do science. Science is just taxonomy. It's just putting things into categorizing. You're saying we can't
that's
categorize
not
because
true
everything's
at
changing.
all. No, the science is a method, and it has
And what is the
it
goal of
has very
science?
clear steps to it.
Right. And what is the goal?
The goal is to find out what's consistent.
Right. And you
So
said there is no consistency.
that's not what I said at all.
Oh, what'd you say?
I said there's nothing static.
Okay. But you said we can't have definition to anything.
No,
You remember that?
nouns. I was talking about nouns. There are no borders to these things that we are
You said there's no border
imagining
to
have these
being,
borders.
period. Everything is pure flux, pure change.
Yeah, everything is constantly changing.
So then you can't categorize it.
Well, I am definitely against categorizing, and that's not what
Then you're
science
against
is about.
science.
It's a method.
Oh my.
It's
Okay,
a method.
listen. Yeah, but it's the reason you never heard of it. There's a reason, my friend. But listen, all right, let's go ahead and let's just continue on with this. All right, so the fourth category is that which exists. Well, the third category is that which exists is self-existent. Now, if something is self-existent, it can't be an effect. Would you agree with that? Because it's the cause of something else.
Self-existent, it can't be. No, I don't agree with that.
So something can be a cause and an effect at the same time in the same relationship. This is the law of identity, law of non-contradiction.
With itself, no, it's not. It is an effect. If everything is an effect, if everything is actually in our, as we consider this moment, if everything is an effect, then what's the issue? I don't understand.
Then you're saying everything is self-created.
No, not at all. It just is.
No, it doesn't. No, it's not. It's becoming.
The
It's
idea
pure
of
becoming.
created is not necessary to inject there. You've
Okay,
chosen
you're saying
to do that because you've listened to whatever philosophers or spiritual guidance that has told you so. But there is no necessity to inject the idea of creation into this.
Okay, what you're at one time you're saying everything is pure being, and you're saying everything is pure becoming. Which is it?
Pure. I'm sorry. Pure what?
You're saying everything is pure change or pure being. If something is pure being, it doesn't change. Being is just is.
Everything is pure change then.
Okay, so that and everything is pure effect, pure becoming, and it's really nothing.
I'm not sure why you're adding the word pure to it, but everything.
Well, you're saying that. You're saying that's what it is.
Changing, and we are part of an event, as I understand it.
Okay, but is that event, is all of reality pure change?
Yes, I would.
Okay, then it's self-created.
No, what? Again, you've injected this idea of creation into it, and it exists. And
do you create anything?
Perhaps you'd like to discuss the origin of where space, time, and matter come from.
But that's what we're discussing right now, Brandon.
Well, then why don't you just say that? We weren't discussing the origin of it, so.
I was
of the origin of it because at time zero, which is something I can't conceptualize.
Time is the measurement of change.
There is not matter. There is not energy. There is not space-time. So at time zero, which I can't conceptualize, it's a realm I cannot enter. It's not part of our universe. So I can't say anything about time zero. And if we view, I mean, we only have an understanding, a rather mathematical understanding of what happens as time approaches zero, and there is no and zero is not something that we can reach through observation or even mathematically. So it doesn't exist. It's undefined. It's not part of our universe, and so that's how I understand it to be.
How do you know?
I'm sorry. How do I know what?
How do you know that you're making an assertion about of?
Well, we got to define the universe somehow, right?
Universe is all that is.
Okay.
And it's being. And there is a sense that it
then
exists.
We're going to go ahead and describe what is.
and not what is becoming. There's a difference between being and becoming. Change and being, they're not the same thing. And you're trying to conflate the two in the same, and it's not coherent. If something changes, it is the effect of something else. And you can't have an eternal regress of effects without causes. Stephen Hawking said in The Nature of Time and Space that almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Time is just a measurement of change. So time, therefore, by definition, is not eternal.
Time is just a measurement of change. I don't believe that to be
Motion
an accurate
and change.
representation of time. Pardon?
It's time is a measurement of motion and change. We look at celestial bodies or atomic bodies, and we measure their movement in relation to each other.
I don't think that that's a good way to describe it at all.
Okay,
And,
help me out.
I think you're at best probably misrepresenting something that Stephen Hawking said. And feel free to tweet at me about it at some point, but and find what you're saying, and then I would be happy to respond to it and give you perhaps a slightly different interpretation. Not that
You
I
can do that right now.
necessarily agree with everything that Stephen Hawking has ever said, but yeah, I don't think that that's at all a good way to conceptualize time.
Okay, correct me. What's wrong with my definition?
To conceptualize time for you, or try to?
No, I want you to correct. You said I was incorrect, so now the burden is yours to show me where I was incorrect.
Okay, what you said was that Stephen Hawking basically explained it this way, or the way that you were explaining it, and
He said time began at the Big Bang.
So me doubting that is no, time began at the Big Bang. Yeah, I think that that's probably fair enough to say. But
and time is a measurement of change. The bang was a change.
I would not consider it to be a measurement of change. No, I would consider time to be closer to more of a like dimensionally, like as in you have height, width, depth, and time. So that's how I conceptualize it.
Yeah, space time. Listen, Brandon, I apologize,
so basically we're at coordinates within the event, which is known as the universe.
Okay, I apologize, but I've got to go. Okay. I've got a super busy day today, and I'm like, even this week, I'm glad we could do it right now, because this is the only time basically I would be able to do it until probably middle of next week. But we can talk again if you want to. But I am very much appreciate your spirit and your kindness in wanting to interact, and being so generous in your attitude. Sometimes people, don't even, they'll say they want to have a conversation, but they really don't. And you did, and you're very kind and very friendly in the way that you interacted with me. So I'm grateful for that, and thank you for giving me the time. I have a hard time finding people who want to have conversation anymore. I don't know why, but
I think
you're
you
very
might
great.
want to adjust your tact, but and
I have a very dry sense of humor too. I enjoy playing.
I feel like you would probably have a lot more luck if you were saying, "Hey, I'd really like to talk to some atheists about and we can share our perspectives." But and it might be if I were to give a bit of criticism about it, I would say that you've come across a couple of times as a bit condescending, and that's not really appreciated by anyone. So
well, here's the thing:
constructive criticism, and feel free to do with it what you will. And understand you got to go, Trey. Thanks for talking to me, and hope you have a great day.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. Very kind, and hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
All right.
All right. We'll see you. Blessings.